Act 3, Little Altar Boy. Despite our nation's best efforts to turn Christmas into a festival that's about gifts and toys and buying stuff, it is still a religious holiday. Please welcome comedian Mike Birbiglia.
One of the reasons Christmas was a really big deal to me when I was a kid was that I was really good at being Catholic. And not everyone was. Like my brother Joe only came to church on Christmas. And even then he'd show up late. He'd be like, Mike, the later you show up, the shorter it is. And then he'd change the lyrics to the hymns. Like there was this one we used to sing every week that goes, Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. And Joe's lyrics were, Christ has lied, Christ is in prison, Christ will come at 10. I'd try so hard not to laugh because I was on Jesus' team, you know. Well, I went to church every week with my mom, and I thought it made me her favorite. My mom decided early on that I would be a priest, and I really thought that I would, and I liked the idea. So every week we'd go to church. Like when other kids would go to the park or the mall, we'd go to church, and like sometimes I'd be like, hey, Mom, like I want to go to the mall. And my mom would say, like funny you going to the mall. That's an expression that my mom uses, like fun. Which is her way of saying like hell, because she's Catholic, and for Catholics, hell is fun. When you're 7 and your mom sends you to Catholic school, it's all pretty simple. There's this guy Jesus, and he totally loves you. And you're like, great. And they're like, you love him too, right? And you're like, I'm sorry, do I know this guy? And they're like, you know, from the cross. That guy loves you and you love him. And it starts innocently enough, as innocently as man-boy love can start. You know, you just kind of accept that there's this guy Jesus who everybody's afraid of, but everybody loves because he loves everybody. And a long time ago, some people killed him, and it's not totally your fault. So don't be scared or sad because he's living forever next to God, who's his dad, even though he's also God. And also there's this whole Holy Spirit part too that no one really understands. Am I going too fast for you, 7-year-old boy? So you go with that for a few years, and then you're 11 and you get the word that Father Grady wants you to be one of his new altar boys. He's seen your work at recess on the kickball field, and he thinks you've got what it takes to snuff out candles and hold a chalice and not trip and fall in your robe. And so I became an altar boy, and the answer is no. I wasn't, and I think it's because they knew I was a talker. You know, I have that look about me. And I loved being an altar boy because church was glamorous. You know, the priests have these multicolored robes. You know, as an altar boy, even you have a robe, just a plain white one. It's like karate, where they start you with the white belt, and then you get the different colored belts once you start kicking some devil ass. So I love being an altar boy, especially on Christmas. That's when I could really show off. Because Christmas was cool. I mean, everyone came to Christmas Mass. You know, people who you never saw at church came to Christmas Mass. People like my brother Joe. You know, and they'd see me there with their families, and they'd see me in my robe, all just like fitting in around the church. I acted like I owned the place. Like, oh yeah? You want to walk up on the altar? That's probably not a great idea. That's where J-Dog hangs out. You know Jesus too? Yeah, he's a pretty good friend of mine. It's cool of you to come by, but seriously, where were you during Advent? That's for the real diehard Catholics, that last one. Shortly after I finished college, my mom developed this condition where, as far as the doctors could tell, part of her spine was pushing into her spinal cord, and they weren't sure of what was happening, but she was experiencing chronic pain all over her body. And so the doctors did this operation, and the problem is the pain didn't go away. So my mom was faced with both the original pain and then the pain of this operation. And she was laid up for months. She was in bed, and so I came home and lived with them to administer her pain meds and get her meals, and also she was also prescribed this drug called Ativan, which is an anti-anxiety, and she was supposed to take it 3 times a day, but pretty soon she wanted to take it 5 or 6 times a day, and I wasn't sure why, and I asked her, and she pulled me aside and she said, "I'm dying." And I was so upset that I called her doctor and I asked him if my mom was dying, and he said, "Well, we don't know what's happening exactly, but there's no reason to believe she's dying. Just make sure she doesn't take too much Ativan. It's making her delirious." So I hid the Ativan. And it drove my mother crazy. At one point she shouted, she goes, "Michael, where is the Ativan?" And I said, "Mom, I can't give you the Ativan." And she said, "I am your mother. And if I say get me the Ativan, you get me the Ativan." And I said, "Mom, like fun am I getting you the Ativan?" She started pulling me aside every day, and she'd say, "Michael, I'm dying, and I'm going to hell." And the way she said it wasn't in that exaggerative way that people use it, where they say, "I'm going to hell." She said it as though it was the next stop on her train, like it was this actual location. It wasn't like a concept. It was like, "I'm going to hell on Tuesday." And I'd say, "Mom, you're not going to hell." And she said, "No, there's things that I've done in my life that you don't know about." And I'd say, "Mom, if you're going to hell, hell is going to be really crowded, because I had you as a first-round draft pick for heaven." And she wouldn't laugh. I mean, there wasn't a lot of laughing in this period. And eventually my mom got better. But the whole thing shook me up. It was like this side of Catholicism I never thought about as a kid. And I never went back to church. I can't be part of an organization that convinced my mom she was headed for eternal torture. Like hell am I going to a church like that? Except, of course, on Christmas.
Mike Birbiglia. He's the author of a book based on his one-man show called Sleepwalk with Me and Other Painfully True Stories.